So our next guest that's going to be hanging out with Chad on the DTE Energy Live stage is Senator John Damoose from Traverse City. So we appreciate having you both here, and I will turn this over to Chad to move forward a conversation with Senator Damoose talking about one of our legacy industry of the automobile.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Appreciate it, Representative, or Senator rather, for joining us here. Let's start so people know, like, what is your historical tie to the auto industry?
Well, you know what? I mean, this is the great American industry and the great Michigan industry, and I was proud to grow up as part of that. My dad was at Ford Motor Company for years and years, and then when Lee Iacocca left Ford and went to Chrysler, my dad followed him over to Chrysler, and ultimately became the head of marketing at Chrysler during all those great turnaround years in the 80s and 90s. And you know, I got to grow up. I was a kid and just hanging on every word of these great stories of them fighting to save a great American institution and a whole industry there. So I fell in love with it, just everything I learned from there on. And then as I grew, we grew up and started a film production company. We ended up doing a lot of different things in the automobile industry. Produced several national television specials for Ford Motor Company during their turnaround years after the Great Recession there, when Al Mulally was there, and they didn't take the bailout money, and they went and rebuilt the great American industry. And so I've just always been fascinated by the whole thing.
So you have some long lineage here, and you've seen different iterations of the auto industry. Sure. What's your perception of how the big three fit into the greater auto industry globally right now?
Well, I mean, the global auto industry doesn't exist without the big three. I mean, we basically modernized the whole thing starting back to Henry Ford there. While people were playing with automobiles, we taught the world how to make them at a scale and make them affordable. And so our automobile industry is absolutely, the American automobile industry is critical to this whole nation. You know, it was funny because before we did that program with Ford, what I was really pitching was the ultimate documentary series on the American automobile industry as the quintessential American industry, because so much of what we know about the modern world that we love today has its roots at some point in the automobile industry, whether you're talking about Disney animation, which came directly from computer-aided design in the auto industry, or whether our space program that Ford Motor Company literally built mission control that took us to the moon. Anything that you can imagine, somehow you can, sort of like 6 degrees of separation. Remember that game with, yeah, this is like, you can find several degrees of separation and trace almost anything back to the automobile industry.
So you are a state senator from northern Lower Peninsula. Right. From Harbor Springs.
Yeah.
You don't have a car plant in your district. No. You don't have an R&D facility in your district. How do you, when you talk to people about the auto industry or things related to the auto industry, like if you need to go defend a vote that you took maybe on battery plants or whatnot, how do you go talk to your constituents outstate about this and why it matters to them and their livelihood?
Well, I mean, people up here are no dummies. We know that our bread and butter comes in no small part from the automobile industry. I mean, that's what really helped build and grow northern Michigan. I mean, all the way back from the material standpoint. I mean, the Upper Peninsula thrived because of our iron ore, which builds the steel, sure, because of our timber, which was so critical to the whole industry, because of our shipping, and so everybody knows. But then there's an indirect benefit too, with all the travelers who come up here, and the second homes and the things that sustain our economy these days all came from Detroit and from our roots there. So, I think people do have an understanding, as goes the auto industry, so goes Michigan, and so goes northern Michigan as well.
What do we need to do in your mind to keep the industry from leaving? Yeah. I mean, parts of it we've seen General Motors building tech facilities out west and in Austin. Ford, I think, opened one up in Atlanta. Obviously, they all got a presence in Silicon Valley because of the AI talent essentially there, and the race to build the robot car, as I call it. But what do we need to do to keep that in Warren and Dearborn and Auburn Hills?
Well, I think we need to prioritize it as a state, frankly. And I saw exactly what you're talking about. My daughter went to college out at Stanford in Palo Alto, and I drive by there and drive throughout Northern California California and there's a GM building. What are they doing out here? This is our industry. And so what we've seen though is that in this press to diversify our economy, we've sort of taken our eyes off the ball in terms of keeping the automobile industry right at the center of this. And I'll tell you an example. I took a hard vote, and I got a lot of criticism for that vote for the Ford Motor Company battery plant. Now I say it very clearly that I was talking about Ford's battery plant, not the Goshen plant, which had Chinese ties. This was the Ford plant. And it took a hard vote. People were not, even in my own party, were not happy with me. But I've since said that Ford could have been making fairy dust in that plant, and I would have voted for it. Because this is our hometown team, and we need to do everything we can to keep them here. And after that, a couple other votes, I was talking to a key industry insider, and they said, John, do you realize that if the program they were working on at the time didn't happen, we'll never build anything in the state of Michigan again? And I said, that's crazy. Why? Why? She said, because we never know what we're going to get from this state. One minute you love us, the next minute you hate us. One minute you're cracking down on us regulation-wise, next minute you want us back. We go into a state like Tennessee or South Carolina and they roll out the red carpet. They're unified, Republicans and Democrats. They want us there. They love our jobs that we're providing. We don't get any of that from Michigan. So I think a lot of it goes back to policy.
In 3 years, the mega tax credits for the big three will expire. This is the Michigan Economic Growth Authority, which was a tax credit on the old Michigan business tax that essentially reimbursed the automakers for the state income tax, the 4.25% state income tax that most of their employees pay. So it is a subsidy. It has cost the state some $500 million a year in lost tax revenue, but then you get those people that stay and and pay other kinds of taxes and whatnot. Do you think we need, as a state, to consider extending the mega credits or creating some kind of new incentive specialized for the auto industry?
Well, I do think we need to look at an incentive for sure. I don't know about extending the credits. Our big fear last year was that they were going to end, the state was going to go back on a deal we made with these people and end the credits sooner, which is absolutely immoral in my mind. But yeah, you know, we do, because while you and I know what a great state this is to live in, and we love it here. We're here on Mackinac Island. It's beautiful. There's so much to do in this state. It's just great. Around the country, we have a real image problem. And part of it is deserved from, like what I was saying, where our policies swing back and forth and other states are more consistent. But part of it is an old narrative, which isn't even true anymore. That they think of Detroit, how it used to be when we were struggling. Detroit, as you heard earlier today, is on its way back. It's beautiful there. They think of we're a dying Rust Belt state. And we have to do some things to attract people here to make it desirable, because other states are doing this and they don't know what a great state it is. So we need to develop some sort of economic tools. And I'll tell you what, I was working with Senator McMorrow on developing a framework for a 10-year economic development plan. And our bills that we introduce aren't going to pass. They're not necessarily the right ones, but it got the conversation started. And I'm sure she and I would have radically different views on what our economic development plan would be or should be, but we both agree we need a plan, because we both sit on the appropriations committee and we get one-off project after another with no rhyme or reason, no long-term strategy behind these things, and we need to start to think more strategically as a state.
Why can't you get other members of the legislature to get together on these things?
Well, I think we are getting some. We are getting some, but you know, it's really an odd narrative that has grown up. I remember after that Ford vote, I walked through. It was late at night. I was walking through the Capitol, and I felt proud that I did my part to help the auto industry. Something I dreamed about doing from the time I was a kid. And I thought back to when my dad was in the industry, and there wasn't a self-respecting legislator in the entire state who wasn't all in for the automobile industry. And we need to get back to that, very much so. And remember that this is a priority for us. And what are we going to do to keep the industry here?
Okay. One of the things we were just talking about with Representative Carter and Aragona was the transformational brownfield legislation.
Yep.
and expanding that program so that Dan Gilbert and General Motors can do a redevelopment of the Renaissance Center. What's your thoughts about that program, and is that something that you would support?
I voted for it. I voted for it, and we passed it out of the Senate. I voted for it. I mean, so, you know, we're not in business to just hand out money and all these type of things, but that's such a clear investment that that pays dividends for a long time for the state. And you look at what they've done in Detroit, it's amazing. I was down there again for a Tiger game, and we were milling around late at night down Woodward Avenue. I mean, when I was a kid, we wouldn't dream of that. And it's beautiful, and they've done so many things, and they need to keep growing. You look at what Ford's done with the old train station. What a masterpiece that building is, and they saved it. Now you look down by the waterfront and what they could do with this brownfield. It's just a great program, and I hope we get it passed through the House.
I mean, obviously, it helps subsidize the Hudson's Tower, the renovation of the Book Tower, which had been empty for 20-some years. In the past, to sell that program in the legislature, folks have kind of tried to point to, okay, we're gonna fix other places outside of Detroit, so it's not just a Detroit issue. And I do recall the hole in downtown Petoskey was marketed as one of them. What's the status of that? I'm kind of curious.
It's just sitting there, and this is ripe for development. I had Quentin Messer came up from MEDC a few years ago, and I remember walking him through town. I said, "Now, Quentin, I want you to sit and look at this beautiful town." And he turned and looked back at Petoskey. I said, "Now, I want you to look at this. This is what I'm talking about. You see this big empty hole, which is the entryway. It's the gateway into this beautiful northern Michigan community. It's just sitting there. That's gotten caught up over the years in all kinds of local politics, and that's the problem. You know, everybody points at Lansing and Washington to say how dysfunctional it is and how we're at each other's throats, which is sadly true. But local politics aren't a whole lot better right now. So hopefully there's going to get some movement on there pretty quickly to fix that. That would be a great program.
Kind of wrapping up here, one of the big topics up here on the island is data centers, and all the policy goes around electricity and whatnot for them. Do you think we have all the right tools to protect consumers, electricity consumers, in this rush to build data centers?
You know, it's all happening in real time here. So I mean, I think that, you know, on the one hand, we need to be a 21st century economy. We don't want to be just purely a flyover state. And some people I talk to, I'm not sure whether they actually want to just go back to an agrarian society here. But so we do need to modernize our society. But you've seen the pushback that people can have. And one thing that bothers me, though, is I think a little hysteria has taken over. And maybe it wasn't, these projects weren't presented right and to get local buy-in. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if we have the tools yet or not, but we know for one thing is we're not going to be building a bunch of these until we're sure we have the tools. The communities won't let us. So
yeah, absolutely. Senator John Damoose, I really appreciate your time today.
Thanks,
Thank you for coming
Great to be with you. Yeah,
take care.